on Unsolved Mysteries.
Michelle O'Malley says it started with a single vivid dream about her deceased grandfather. Over time, the dreams became more frequent and more real, leaving Michelle convinced that her grandfather's spirit was actually communicating with her from beyond the grave. In Connecticut, a wealthy community is shocked by the brutal death of a 15-year-old girl. Does a key to her murder lie with the sons of a prominent family who lived across the street? For Jean Warren, a foster child named Roger Lindsley became the loving son she never had. But after 3 years together, the authorities placed Roger with another family, launching Jean on a poignant search that has spanned nearly 3 decades. Also, we've traveled here to Washington State for a startling report. New information has surfaced in the baffling case of the Green River Killer. Over a 2-year period, he claimed at least 49 victims, all of them young women. He set in motion one of the greatest criminal investigations in history. Yet no arrest was ever made, and the name of the killer remains a mystery. Incredibly, this man claims to know what the police do not: the identity of the Green River Killer. It all began here, along the Green River near Kent, Washington, where the bodies of the first victims were found in 1982. More than a decade later, the search for answers continues. Join me for this fascinating edition of Unsolved Mysteries. What happens when we die? Is there a life beyond this one? Remarkably, 4 out of 10 people say they've experienced some form of communication with the dead, often through dreams. These visits are called direct contacts. What makes them unique is the specific, previously unknown information passed on to those who have been visited. Consider the case of Michelle O'Malley of Portsmouth, Virginia. It was November 15th, 1993, 3 months after the birth of Michelle's son, Benjamin. That evening, Michelle had an extraordinary dream, the first direct contact with her deceased grandfather.
In the dream, I saw my grandfather, and he came up to me, and he asked me,
"Did you make that French toast?"
And all throughout my dream, he kept coming up saying,
"Did you make that French toast?"
At first, I thought it was just one of those things where I must have had him on my mind and, you know, thinking it was just a dream. And I asked one of the family members, and they said, oh, yes, he loved French toast, you know. And I was like, okay, well, this must be a coincidence.
Michelle was just 10 when her grandfather, Benjamin, passed away. As she grew up, specific memories faded, but Michelle never forgot his warmth, his strength, his kindness. Michelle always knew she would name her first son Benjamin in honor of her grandfather, but she never imagined the profound impact it was to have upon her life. A second dream came just days after the first. Michelle's grandfather reappeared with a message for his son Greg, Michelle's father.
Michelle, tell Greg to get a pail of water and meet me at the railroad tracks.
I didn't know if it was all in my head again, like the French toast or not. And I asked my dad, I said, what did he mean by this?
And I was just stunned. I didn't say anything. She says, does that make any sense? I says, it makes perfect sense.
Now, Greg, one of the things we got to watch out for.
And I remembered back when I was a child, he had asked me on Labor Day to go fishing with him.
Let's take a look at this.
And I remember taking the pail and caught an eel.
Yes, we got another one!
Great, fantastic.
And my job was to carry it back in the pail. And it was kind of a scary thought. I mean, this thing squirming around in this pail, walking back with it. Michelle had no way of knowing that. I became a believer at that point. I knew that it wasn't something she was just remembering bits and pieces of memories from her childhood, that these were things that she could possibly have no knowledge of.
One of the most fascinating evidences of life after death, contained in direct contacts, is the fact that loved ones who have passed on will often, through particularly vivid dreams, tell us little bits of information, tell us things that we could not possibly know.
Oh, Michelle, I'm so happy you named him Benjamin.
Over time, Michelle's dreams began to feel more and more real. Michelle actually appeared in some dreams herself, conversing with her grandfather.
I'm so proud of my grandchildren. Michelle, ask Greg if he knows where your uncle's Purple Heart is.
What Purple Heart, Grandpa? When I asked my father about the Purple Heart, my dad was like, no, Michelle, you know, none of my uncles, not that I know of, had a Purple Heart.
And one day I happened to be speaking to my mother, and I asked her about it. And she says, oh, yeah. She says, your uncle had gotten a Purple Heart, and she had it. And it was wrapped in a flag, which my father had also told Michelle that's the way she would find the Purple Heart.
The dreams began to take Michelle to places she had never been before. Places her grandfather had spent some of the happiest days of his life.
Grandpa! Grandpa!
We're late for the track. I'm sorry, honey, you have to go back. Now go on home. But tell Greg I got his lucky pencil.
I thought, now I'm really losing it. This did not make sense whatsoever. So I called Dad. When I told him about the lucky pencil, Dad just sat there again on the phone, and he was real quiet. And he told me that when he was a little boy, they used to all go to the racetrack.
Lucky pencils! Get your lucky pencils!
My mom had a box of pencils, little stubs and full-length ones, and I took that down off the shelf, and I stood at the gate of the racetrack and sold lucky pencils.
Lucky pencils! Get your lucky pencils! Like to buy lucky pencils?
She was coming up with little nuances that I couldn't imagine how she was picking these things up, because we had never talked about it, and there would be no way for her to know these things.
Another dream at the racetrack brought more information, and the unexpected appearance of family members Michelle had never met.
Michelle! Hey, Michelle! Come on up! Yeah, come on!
I walked up to the bleachers after they called. You know, I did not recognize them.
Honey, you remember me? It's your Uncle Don, huh? You remember your Uncle Bill?
Yeah, Uncle Bill!
Oh, it's so good to see you, sweetie.
Is my grandpa here?
Oh, your grandpa, he's here, honey. He's down with the guy who runs the times on the horses every morning.
Come to find out, my uncle said that yes, my grandfather used to talk to a man who would clock the horses in the morning, and he would try to get the good score so he would know who to bet on during that time. So yeah, and I had no way of knowing that, none. He said he will always watch over me and Benjamin. So in a way, I look at it as a guardian angel. I often wondered, why me?
So beautiful.
Michelle had named her baby Benjamin after her grandfather. I believe that's the reason Grandpa came back to her. It was a way of affirming that he's there. It was a way also of saying, thank you. Hey, that's nice. Just the way if somebody here on Earth named a child after you, you'd say, well, thank you, how flattering. That was all.
2 years and more than 100 dreams later, Michelle O'Malley looks forward to each encounter with her grandfather, just as one would anticipate the visit of an old friend.
I just kind of look at it as a blessing, a gift. One thing he did tell me was that I was going to help a lot of people with my story. And I don't know how I'll know that, but I believe him, because when Grandpa speaks, I listen.
Michelle, tell Greg to get a pail of water and meet me at the railroad track.
Did you make that French toast? So have you named it Benjamin? Because your next child...
Tell Greg I got his lucky pencil.
Is there an earthly explanation for Michelle O'Malley's extraordinary experiences? A skeptic might say her dreams are just wishful thinking. That hardly matters to Michelle, who credits the visions of her grandfather with teaching her the true meaning of family. Next, a special report. This man believes he has evidence that the Green River killer was his own brother. And later, murder rocks a wealthy community and two teenage boys become suspects. I'm standing by the Green River, 13 miles south of Seattle, Washington. It was here in the summer of 1982 that the bodies of 5 young women were found. It was the beginning of the hunt for a heinous mass murderer, a hunt that is yet to end. Tonight we will re-examine this disturbing case and take a closer look at one of the key suspects, a man who many believe was the infamous Green River killer. It remains the largest unsolved serial murder case in U.S. history. 2 years, 49 victims, all young females, most of them prostitutes who operated along the SeaTac Strip near the Seattle-Tacoma Airport. Nearly all of them strangled and dumped in a remote area. Thousands of leads were investigated, hundreds of suspects interrogated. Today, more than a decade later, one man in particular stands out. His name, William J. Stevens. Bill Stevens was a petty thief, in and out of trouble with the law for most of his life. In 1981, he simply walked away from a minimum security facility where he was serving time for burglary. Over the next 8 years, Stevens avoided the authorities, dividing his time between Seattle, Spokane, and Portland, Oregon.
Bill Stevens was an alienated, disaffected individual who never held a job. He fit all the FBI profiles of serial killers. His poor relationships with women, a mother who throttled his personality and development. He was raging to his friends about how the prostitutes of the SeaTac Strip were spreading the AIDS epidemic.
My brother told people on several occasions that he wanted to kill women. He wanted to torture them. He wanted to cut them up, dissect them. He wanted to fill them with rocks. He wanted to fill them with concrete. And he wanted to still put all of this on tape. He thought that would be neat.
King County Police. Chris, take the back.
January 1989. Acting on several tips, police searched Stevens' parents' house in Spokane. They uncovered a cache of guns and police badges. They also found dozens of Polaroids of nude women, most of them prostitutes. In another room, police came upon dozens of pornographic tapes and fraudulent credit card receipts from 1981 to 1989, covering the years of the Green River killings.
Stevens also had a fully equipped police car, which he had managed to get registered to a non-existent city. He had an ambulance, a police motorcycle. Those factors tended to make him more of a suspect in that it would have provided some ease for contacting potential victims.
Investigators later searched a second house in Portland, where Stevens lived until 1985. In the basement, there was a secret room which could only be accessed by using an automatic garage door opener.
The secret room first came to the attention of a neighbor who lived outside Portland at the same time Stevens did. He invited her in to see this room, and in the room, as I remember it, there was a bed, and on the bed was a mannequin a store dummy that was dressed in women's underwear and was struck in an obscene pose.
In January of 1989, Bill Stevens was arrested and charged with felony escape and a series of weapons violations. That summer, Stevens was also publicly named as a prime suspect in the Green River killings. But within months, authorities had cleared Stevens, primarily because of an alibi provided by his younger brother.
I visited him in the King County Jail before he was transferred back to Spokane, and he mentioned that he couldn't have done the killings because he was on a trip in Connecticut visiting me in 1982 when the killings first happened.
After the visit, Bill Stevens and his parents continued on a cross-country trip. Bob Stevens produced receipts which seemed to prove that Bill was still traveling with their parents when the first 5 victims were murdered.
Additionally, we were able to determine that Stevens was not in the Seattle area. He was either in Spokane or Portland or Vancouver, Washington on the day before or the day after 19 Green River victims were last seen.
Today, many people still believe Bill Stevens got away with murder at least 49 times. Perhaps the most surprising convert is Stevens' own brother, the person who provided him with his alibi.
I really believe my brother is a Green River killer, that the police had the killer behind bars in 1989, and I helped get a killer away free.
Bob Stevens now questions whether his brother was in fact with their parents when the first 5 murders were committed.
My dad had told me that my brother didn't always leave with them. He would always just kind of join them somewhere, just appear on their trip and then leave again. That was his way of providing a paper trail. He used my parents as his alibi.
Bob Stevens believes his brother had his own unique MO. He would travel to various parts of the country, establish that he was there, fly back to Seattle to commit murder, and then return to his vacation spot to reestablish his alibi.
Bob Stevens has never contacted us and provided us with any information contrary to what he initially gave us. This is basically news to me.
The police are involved in misdirection here because they don't want the public looking too closely at the various roles Stevens played in his life.
Roderick Thorpe claims that the authorities are not reinvestigating William Stevens for one simple reason. Thorpe believes that Stevens was a police informant.
Police are only as good as the information they get, which they get from people who live, as Stevens did, on the edge of society, committing crimes that the police have to overlook because a guy like Stevens is constantly giving them information about more serious criminals. So he was a good police informant, but at the same time, he was indulging in his little sport there, which was the murder of young girls. But they never could believe it.
Bill Stevens was never an informant for any of the local police departments and was never affiliated with any of the local police departments. There's no cover-up with regards to the investigation of William Stevens. He's simply not the Green River killer.
Bill Stevens died of cancer in 1991. Today, Detective Jensen is the only police officer actively working the Green River case. Officially, the murders themselves ceased in the early months of 1984.
We've explored the reasons why the killings may have stopped. The suspect could be dead, could be incarcerated for another crime, he could have moved to a different part of the country.
But have the killings truly stopped? At least 6 unsolved murders in Seattle in the late 80s and early 90s bear an eerie resemblance to the Green River killings. If William Stevens was in fact the killer, then who could be responsible for these latest deaths?
It seems very clear that Stevens did not work alone. Stevens' phone bills were in the possession of the police, and one of the detectives told me that they were puzzled about hours and hours of long-distance calls to a certain number. What were they talking about?
There is no evidence to support the theory that there was more than one killer. Long telephone calls to a friend are not in any way incriminating, and they, in many cases, tend to provide him with alibis.
There have been killings since that are Green River-type killings, all right? Suggesting that the person who was Stevens' accomplice has continued in a very random way because that's the way to get away with it.
Was William J. Stevens a Green River killer? Did he work with an accomplice? Or was a killer someone else? Someone who may still be on the loose? In a moment, a woman needs your help to find the foster son she still loves as her own.
Here's his things.
For Jean Warren and her family, February of 1967 was a time of tearful parting.
Where's my truck?
Where is your truck?
5-year-old Roger Lindsley, who had been living with the Warrens as a foster child, was leaving.
Here you go, sweetheart.
She's here.
I think the whole family was on edge because we knew that we were going to lose Roger. And just broke my heart because Roger was our family, and I had all intentions of adopting him and my husband also as our son, but didn't work out that way.
It's been almost 30 years since Jean Warren said goodbye to Roger Lindsley. Tonight, Jean needs your help to find the foster son she still loves as her own. They met in 1964. Jean, her husband Don, and her 3 young daughters were living in Queens, New York. But the Warrens had always longed for a son, and Jean had a special reason for wanting to be a foster parent.
I was a foster child. And because of this, I guess I wanted a foster child to do what somebody did for me.
Hello, Roger.
Hello.
Hello, Roger. Welcome to our family.
It's the tender, loving care. To me, this is what's important, giving a child the love, the attention that he needed, and not just a bed to sleep in.
Roger, this is Carol and Wendy and Donna. Donna, this is Roger.
Hi, do you want to come and play with my toys?
He was kind of shy, but Donna, she was a year older than Roger, and she took to him.
Now, the agency did tell you about his little problem, didn't they?
Problem?
Well, Roger's a little slow. He has trouble picking up new things. You just have to be patient with him.
Jean and her family were more than patient. Donna especially took her new brother under her wing.
All 3 of us girls tried to help him as much as we could, but since I was closest to his age, I think that's why we got along so good. He was my buddy and my brother. I thought of him as my brother. I never thought of him as a foster child. He was Roger, my brother.
I'm ready to go. Roger, you got him on the wrong feet again.
He'd come to me and he'd go, I got my shoes on, and then I'd look down at his feet and they'd be on wrong, you know, and I was always trying to show him, you know, which side to put on which foot.
I'm gonna take your shoes off so I can get him on the right feet, okay?
It took a while, but he finally did learn, and he learned to tie his shoes really quickly.
And pull. Okay? That's how you tie your shoes, okay?
Roger, do you remember what this is? You said the word yesterday. Is it soda? Can you say that for me?
Soda.
Very good. Would you like some? There you go.
Within a year's time, I have to say Roger developed so wonderfully. He started smiling a lot, laughing a lot. You know, he was no longer that shy little boy that walked in that day.
You're doing real good, Roger. I'm proud of you.
I think adjusting in our family was the best thing for Roger. Whatever we did, he was there with us. And each day I was loving this child more and more and more.
Roger lived with the Warrens for 3 years. Then in 1967, Don and Jean had to move to Ohio. They were heartbroken to learn that they could not take Roger with them.
I questioned the agency because I wanted to adopt Roger. And they told me that was impossible because he had family. Then I asked them, would it be possible to take Roger to Ohio with us? And that was also denied because a foster child couldn't be taken out of state.
Mr. Warren?
Yes, come in, please. He's ready.
Roger, you're gonna go with this nice lady.
But I don't want to. I want to stay here.
Despite the fact that Roger had relatives in the area, he would not be returning to them.
Mr. Warren.
Instead, he was to go to another foster family.
But Roger will be well taken care of.
Did you find a nice home for him?
Well, I'm afraid we haven't found him a permanent home yet, but we found a family who can take him in temporarily. I'm afraid they don't speak English, but they're a very good family.
I don't understand. What do you mean they don't speak English?
Well, I'm afraid they only speak Spanish.
Oh, you can't do this. We've worked so hard with Roger. He's doing so well. He's made so much progress.
This kind of troubled me because I felt that Roger would more or less forget everything that he was taught.
Don't do this.
I just thought that would be the worst thing for him, but there was nothing I can do. But I cried, naturally. Even more so, I didn't want to let him go.
Come on, Roger. Time to go.
When she took him to the car, he looked at us and looked at me, and I remember him putting out his hand and crying, I don't want to go, I don't want to go. And
You be a good boy, Roger.
I could only say, Roger, be good. Take care of yourself. And I love you. And I'll always remember you.
Well, let's go back.
When we return, the unsolved murder of a teenage girl fuels controversy and scandal in a wealthy community. On the night before Halloween 1975, 15-year-old Martha Moxley of Greenwich, Connecticut disappeared. For 12 hours, her family was in a panic. The entire neighborhood spread out in search of the missing teenager. The next day, another 15-year-old girl took a shortcut through Martha's yard and made a shocking discovery.
I became an adult very young. I saw something I should never have seen. I saw this beautiful, wonderful, sweet girl maimed, I mean, just devastated. I saw how cruel people can be to people.
I found Martha.
Sheila was crying, and I said, well, is she all right? And she said, she didn't think so. And so I stayed in the house, and this friend went with Sheila, and they came back in a couple of minutes, and my friend said, it's Martha, and she's dead.
The murder of Martha Moxley stunned the wealthy gated community of Belhaven. Initially, everyone assumed the killer had to have been someone from outside the area. In fact, among the suspects then and now are two young men who live less than 200 yards away.
You have a case here which really should be called getting away with murder. And I believe that were this not a prominent family, nobody would have gotten away with this crime.
It's been more than 20 years since Martha Moxley was murdered, but the case remains open and is perhaps now more than ever solvable, not only because of advances in forensic technology such as DNA analysis, but because of stunning new revelations allegedly made by two of the suspects themselves.
Got a 15-year-old female found about an hour ago, Martha Moxley.
October 30th, 1975 had begun innocently. Martha Moxley and several friends went out for an evening of teenage pranks. Early the next afternoon, Martha's body was discovered in her own backyard. Her jeans and underpants were pulled down around her knees, but there was no evidence of sexual assault.
Martha was struck with a golf club. She received several blows to the head. The head of the club was found 50 feet from the portion of her driveway where we believe she was accosted. And subsequently, we were able to determine that she was stabbed in the neck. It's believed that a portion of the shaft of the golf club that was used was later used as a weapon to stab her with. That particular section of the club, which is probably about a foot long, was never located.
Here are the clubs you requested from that set. It's the only set like that we have.
The golf club turned out to be part of a set belonging to the Skakel family, who lived across the street from the Moxleys. Rushton Skakel is a brother of Ethel Kennedy, Robert Kennedy's widow.
The fact that the club now was determined to have come from from the Skakel resident, I think that was a significant piece of evidence and made us obviously focus our investigation in that household and within that family.
The police estimated that Martha had been murdered between 9:45 and 10 p.m. 15-year-old Michael Skakel told police he had been with Martha that night. 17-year-old Thomas Skakel was with her as well. Thomas, in fact, was the last person known to have seen Martha alive.
Well, we wanted to listen to some tapes, but my brother and my cousin were inside the house listening to music on the big stereo. So we decided to go ahead and listen to music in the car. This song's cool. I like it.
Well, that's
Thomas told detectives that he and Martha, along with Michael and two other friends, sat in the car from around 9 to 9:30.
Well, we were in the car for a while, and my brothers came out and kicked us out of the car because my cousin Jimmy needed a ride home.
We're gonna have to get out. You know they're gonna want to use the car.
When was this? About what time?
Oh, maybe 9:15, 9:30.
And then?
Well, then Brian left, and then Alexandra left, and a few minutes later, Martha left. I had a paper due on Abraham Lincoln, so I went back inside the house and up into my room.
And what time was it?
Say about 9:30.
The police later checked with Thomas's school. They found that no such report had been assigned. Michael Skakel corroborated part of his brother Thomas's story. Michael told police that at 9:30, he went with his two oldest brothers, John and Rush Jr., to give their cousin a ride home. But if Michael was in the car and Thomas was in his room, what happened to Martha Moxley on her short walk home? Investigators found yet another suspect in the Skakel household.
Till about 12:30.
24-year-old Kenneth Littleton had just been hired as a live-in tutor for the Skakel children. He had moved into the house on the morning of the murder.
I spent the entire time watching TV.
What were you watching?
French Connection.
Anybody see you in there watching TV?
Sure. Mrs. Watson, she's the housekeeper.
Mr. Littleton, I just heard some noise going on outside my window. Could you go and take a look, please?
Sure, Mrs. Watson. I'll go check.
Thank you.
So what time was that?
That was about, 9:45.
Before he went outside, Littleton said that he decided to check on the 7 Skakel children. The 4 oldest boys, Rush Jr., John, Michael, and Thomas, were still not home.
Well, his story was he had heard some noises coming from the bushes on the property and leaves rustling, but he claimed he did not see anything at the time he was out.
That's what I was telling you about.
Littleton said he didn't see Thomas until 10:25, when Thomas joined him in front of the TV. The other 3 boys came home within half an hour. Over the next several months, detectives interviewed more than 200 people and gave several polygraph exams. According to the police, Thomas Skakel was given 2 tests. The first was inconclusive. Thomas passed the second. Then, after months of cooperating with the authorities, the Skakels, on the advice of their attorney, abruptly put a halt to all further questioning.
No one has an obligation to cooperate with police, but most instances, individuals who may have some knowledge that may lead to the identification of an individual who has committed a violent crime are more than pleased to contribute that information to the police. So it's most unusual when an individual possessing information decides that he does not want to give that information to investigators.
Do you know who killed Martha Moxley?
No.
Eventually, attention shifted again to Kenneth Littleton, who'd been dismissed by the Skakels after 6 months.
Yes.
In July of 1976, Littleton was arrested in Nantucket, Massachusetts for burglary and theft. According to the police, he was given a polygraph regarding the Moxley murder and failed. Still, authorities felt there wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest. The case became inactive.
No.
And you know you can always count on your family, don't you?
If you're implying that my family is lying to protect me, you're dead wrong.
Incredibly, 16 years later, it was the media attention surrounding the rape trial of William Kennedy Smith that brought the Moxley case back to life. The connection between the Skakel and Kennedy families served as the impetus. Within weeks, the Greenwich police had reopened their investigation.
The opinion of most of the investigators, who are, again, trained police officers, is that whoever was responsible for this crime probably was in the Skakel home at some time that evening.
And we've been told in no uncertain terms that under no circumstances would they ever speak or agree to any type of interviews or come forward and meet with any of us at any time ever.
In 1991, the police had brought in forensic pathologist Dr. Henry Lee, who would later gain national prominence during the O.J. Simpson murder trial. Dr. Lee was able to utilize technology unavailable in 1975.
We was able to re-examine certain evidence. We was able to find some newer evidence.
Among the items examined by Dr. Lee were clothes found discarded in the Skakels' garbage shortly after the murder. This included a pair of pants and sneakers, which reportedly belonged to Michael.
Yeah, we found some hairs and fibers. Some of the hair microscopically similar to hers. Other hair dissimilar to her.
Dr. Lee determined that the hair belonged to a male Caucasian, but he didn't have a hair sample from any of the possible suspects and was unable to make a match. However, after studying the crime scene photographs, Dr. Lee was able to provide a possible motive for Martha's murder.
The blood smear on her body indicates somebody tried to use force. It suggests could be a sexual motivated homicide.
Leonard Levitt is an investigative reporter for the Long Island-based daily Newsday. He has been looking into the Moxley case since 1982.
There were no defense wounds, which indicates that she knew her attacker. Merely the fact that she was hit repeatedly with a golf club indicates some kind of rage, which personalizes this thing, which indicates that there was such anger that the two had to have known each other. that it was a crime of passion.
Time and again, the trail led back to the Skakels. By 1995, Thomas Skakel was 37 years old, a successful businessman, married, and the father of 2. Years earlier, Thomas's father, Rushton Skakel, had set out to clear the family name once and for all. He hired his own private investigators, but what they allegedly discovered about the night in question was nothing short of a bombshell. In November of 1995, a full 20 years after the murder of Martha Moxley, Leonard Levitt reported in Newsday that Thomas and Michael Skakel had made startling admissions to the private detectives.
Both Thomas and Michael told the investigators that they had lied to the police about their accounts the night of the murder. Thomas said to them that after 9:30, he went inside his house and then he went back out and spent another 20 minutes with Martha. He claims now that he and Martha engaged in a sexual act and then left her at about 10 to 10. If you go back now and you look at the story that he told, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, look, I'm very sorry to be calling you so late, but I'm looking for my daughter, Martha.
At 1 a.m., Martha's mother called around the neighborhood looking for Martha. They awakened Thomas, who's asleep, and his story is, I last saw her at 9:30 p.m. If Thomas doesn't know that Martha is dead, why doesn't he say then, I last left her at 10 to 10? Why is he lying before he even knows that something has happened to her? That's a question that nobody has resolved. His younger brother, Michael, says that around midnight, he went out to Martha's house, climbed up a tree, threw stones at her window to awaken her. The only thing that possibly makes any sense was that if Martha was dead at 10 o'clock and he's up there at midnight, that he didn't know she'd been killed, then climbed down and past what police now say is the murder site, says he heard something, saw nothing, and went home. Now, what this all means, nobody can quite figure out. Clearly, we're in a different situation now than we've ever been, because we've got these admissions from Thomas that he lied to the police, that he's put himself with Martha at precisely the time that the police believe she's murdered.
If you take those articles as being factual, the question arises, why did they lie, and why have they, 20 years later, decided to change their stories?
There's certainly a strange and different change in stories here that firmly indicate to me that the answers to this case are within that family.
It's frustrating to know that for 20 years, they've known that they lied and they know something that's going on. And I'm not saying that they did it, but they know something that could help us.
It was just very exciting to think that we've actually had some little breaking down in their story, and just with the hope that if one thing breaks down, maybe other things will break down. And it's bound to happen. Anytime I can do anything to help it, I'm going to do it. And I won't give up. And I have to do that for Martha.
On our next Unsolved Mysteries, do you believe in ghosts? Perhaps you will after taking the unofficial tour of the legendary Comedy Store in Hollywood. Some people say that once the celebrities go home, the real show begins. Join me next Friday at our regular time for another fascinating edition of Unsolved Mysteries.